council. Oh, we're getting some music. Do we have a camera in the chambers? Are you in the chambers right now? Okay. Great. Okay, so let's call the meeting to order. And should we do a roll call?
Yes.
Sure. Amagashi, Cleary, Gorman, here. Maldonado,
Here.
McKee,
Here.
Mertens,
Here.
Harry,
Here.
Farmer Eden, Shimming. Okay, looks like we have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Need approval of the minutes of June 13th. Do we have a motion?
So move.
Second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. So we're going to, oh, that's from last. Okay, so public appearances not for agenda items. Do we have any public appearances?
None.
Okay, so next up, we have a program presentation by Claire Schaefer Oleksiak, Executive Director of Sustain Dane, and her colleague at Elevate Energy, John Viner, who's a Senior Program Manager. Joyce, do you want to give us a little bit of background on the presentation?
Mike, do you want to take care of that?
Sure. Yep, I can chime in.
Thank you.
We had a chance to meet Claire at a O'Brien Solar Field event that Sustain Dane was involved in at the site of the O'Brien Solar Field, and started talking, and during the course of the conversation found out that they're involved in a myriad of kind of a housing rehabilitation programs, especially focused on energy efficiency and upgrades. And so we thought it might be worth additional conversation. We met with Claire and John, and they gave us kind of an overview and a presentation of some of the activities that they're involved in, including a program partnering with the City of Madison, and now recently a partnership with the City of Middleton. So we thought that it might be good for them to come and kind of give us an update on their programs and activities, the partnerships that they have, and see if it might be something that would be of interest as far as some of our housing for TID dollars in the future to take a look at, especially for that older multifamily housing stock that we have here in Fitchburg. So that's why they're here with us this evening.
Great. It's a perfect dovetail to the last meeting. Thank you so much for being here, Claire and John. Can we turn it over to them?
You want to take it away, Claire?
Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen. That's allowed. Looks like it is. And turn this into present mode.
For the group online, Godwin just joined us for the meeting as well.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome, Godwin.
It's nice to be home.
All right. Well, yeah, thank you for inviting John and I to present. As just mentioned, we had a chance to connect a couple times over the last few months and are here to give you an overview of our Efficiency Navigator program. We're going to share some of the background, what we've been working on, and then some brainstorms based on what Joyce and Michael have shared around how this may fit with some of the housing goals and policies that you guys are looking to pursue. So what is Efficiency Navigator? So the program is aimed to help small to medium-sized multifamily housing become more efficient and then resilient while reducing operating costs to remain affordable. The programs we're working in currently, we're looking at residents who are at about 80% area median income or less, and buildings are not part of an affordable housing subsidy program, all renter occupied. And this is a housing stock that is traditionally been very much in need of efficiency upgrades and is really important when you think about the whole spectrum of affordable housing that we have in the city. There are 4 main goals that we work on for the program. The first one is housing resilience. And we know, you guys know, that affordable housing is hard and there's a shortage in many communities, including Fitchburg. So as we're building more units, what our program is focused on is preserving and investing in the existing stock, taking about both of those strategies, both of those pathways for housing resilience. Equity. Research shows that for working families, rent, utilities, transportation, those are among the highest monthly expenses. So we're addressing the utilities part of that. Also looking at climate change. Affordable housing on average consumes about 33% more energy than market rate housing. It's older, has an upgrade, deferred maintenance. And when we look at community climate goals and global climate goals, we know that we have to look at housing and the energy coming out of housing. And then the last one is access. Not everyone has the time or the resources to put towards improving the affordability of housing and reducing climate change. So what our program is really designed to do is help be that intermediary and make sure that this is happening and make sure that all parts of our community are able to benefit. There are programs happening across the country. This is an area that is emerging, and you can see here from kind of the stars, Wisconsin, Dane County. We're very fortunate to be a leader in this area, and there's a lot of kind of learning and sharing that's going on between these communities. For our local efficiency programs in Madison, we have been focused on about 100 units of energy efficiency and healthy homes work. And most of that has been on the north side of Madison and the southwest side of Madison. This has been funded by the Office of Energy Innovation from the Public Service Commission, as well as philanthropic donations to make that work possible. In Middleton, we're focusing on about 20 units, and this is going to be a deeper dive in these 20 units. So still energy efficiency and healthy homes, also though going to be focused on electrification and solar. This is also funded with ARPA funding in the Middleton example. When we put together the model, it was based on about a year and a half of stakeholder work that we did across Dane County and addressing the barriers that currently exist so that we could create a program to address those barriers. So some of the things we've heard from owners and from residents is limited awareness of programs and funding, not having data, or not knowing how to prioritize what measures make the most sense. Also access to capital, and then difficulty communicating through all of these different stakeholders and service providers. So this right here is what we put together to try to explain everything that happens in the Navigator process, because this is really comprehensive. We start at the beginning from the outreach and the building the relationships and building the trust to doing an energy audit, having that assessment, creating a roadmap, taking care of the bids and the quotes with the contractors, refining those, comparing them, getting multiple bids sometimes, and then mirroring that and matching that up with incentives and financial coordination, completing implementation, and then getting the feedback at the end of the project. So all of these points are places where we heard people get stuck or lost or drop out. So having a consistent relationship and a consistent service throughout all of this has been really important and been able to get implementations happening in our community. This right here is a sample assessment report. We oftentimes kind of get that question. So for this project, this is a 4-unit project. What we looked at is measures. So the ECM would be different measures that have been identified, and then what the grant funding could be able to cover, if there's focus on energy incentives, and then estimated annual utility cost savings. And this is what we talk with the owner about in terms of what we want to move forward with and their prioritization as well. We also have calculations about total carbon impact. There's information later in the report about healthy homes. So much more than just this one table, but we thought you might like to see kind of how the tables look in this report and what kind of data we pulled together. This is also kind of another way to think about the different interventions in homes. So kind of efficiency work right at the top, kind of lighter touch, going down to appliances, electrification. Thinking about cooling has been really important. As we know, we're going to have hotter days, more high heat days. Having cooling available in units has really been really important. And then solar, at kind of the bottom. So kind of all these different layers that can come together and kind of build on each other. From the research that we had, and this is from Elevate's look at the community survey data, Fitchburg appears to have about 84% of the housing is market rate housing, about 13% of it unsubsidized affordable, and about 3% of it subsidized housing. You guys are certainly the housing experts, so you might tell me this is a little bit off, or the years have changed, but in general, this is kind of what we saw from our first look at the landscape in Fitchburg. So what you see there is, of the affordable housing, most of it is actually unsubsidized, which is the area that we tend to focus on. And then the other graph we have here, the back one, is, I hope you can see this isn't blocking it, is the type of units. So, looking at the single family attached and detached, and then going to 2 to 4, 2 to 4, 5 up, and how that splits up as well for the type of units breakdown. This is within the unsubsidized affordable units. Yeah. So what does the program look like? So in addition to Madison and Middleton, we're working in other parts of Wisconsin, and Elevate is working within other cities as well. So usually it contains kind of more or less these elements. And we also talked a bit with Joyce and Michael about how Fitchburg, is kind of looking at their housing. So the first one is some interviews with owners, local government, kind of informing what's happening on the ground locally in the community, so in Fitchburg, so that we connect with the goals for housing and for climate and what a program might look like. Then conducting some intakes and even doing some assessments so that we can figure out what we're seeing in the housing here. We generally know, but it's always good to have a local example. Then piloting the whole process with a select group of businesses, and then seeing if that pilot is going well, consider establishing a full navigator process. So the different service considerations that we've talked about can be interviews, assessments, contractor management, and the integration with focus on energy, or are also right now we're looking at IRA incentives, which are going to be a big part of what's possible in 2023 and going forward. Management of financial contributions, that's one area that we are helping do, is manage what we're able to help support payment of and make it easier for owners to get to yes and move forward. And also reporting and case studies. We did talk about some in the assessment area about some new areas that Fitchburg is exploring. One of those would be code alignment, which is a newer service. So I wanted to list it here. So thinking, the example that I think we talked about in our initial call was fire suppression, right? So what it might look like to make sure that we're taking care of that as assessments going on as well, and just identify some of these other areas, these healthy home and safety areas that we want to make sure are also being taken care of in this housing stock. So the Fitchburg team asked us to put together some idea of what costs might look like, very early on, very preliminary, but kind of breaking up within these service areas. We thought this may be, kind of the way that it could fall out for costs. So, maybe around like $10,000 for this interview process or the assessments, going actually in and helping contribute towards the efficiency upgrades or electrification and solar. So we cut those out separately. We need to learn a little more about the safety and healthy homes piece. So TBD there. And then some program management costs as well. Also wanted to mention that this kind of partnership does have the ability to have matching funds, thinking, early on, probably somewhere to $20,000 to $30,000 for the philanthropic matching funds. But very early on, let's maybe not start with this slide, right? Let's start with kind of the big picture. But we were asked to put together some rough numbers for you as part of the presentation today. So in terms of timeline, we think about this as like a year-long process. So, kind of first couple months for the interviews, and then taking that to decide, what are the elements of the program that we want to pilot. conducting assessments and the concept, that's kind of going in parallels. Those are happening together. Identifying the funding as well for the implementations, depending what that would look like. And then the management of having the measures be put into place. And then the last 2 months, case study and reporting. So with that, we can open up to some discussion and next steps. And this is contact information for John and I. We're always happy to talk and share more. But let me stop sharing my screen at this moment so we can have a conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. That was fantastic. Great information. I will open it up to questions. Just if you have a question, raise your hand, please.
Yes, I have one. Thank you for your presentation, and I appreciate the work that Sustain Dane does. I've definitely been involved in different capacities with Sustain Dane. Love your work. The question that I have is around how much of the cost savings go to the tenant versus the landlord versus the city itself? How does that all typically break down?
Yep. Very good question. So when we do our initial intakes, one of the questions that we ask is who pays for utilities? So, prioritizing the buildings where the residents are the ones paying the utilities is what we're moving towards and focused on. We also look specifically at the rents that are being charged, and we have the owners sign a community benefits agreement that they will agree to keep the rents within the HUD fair market rent limit for at least 3 years.
My other question, I guess I could compare Madison, but Middleton might be a more fair comparison. What's like the initial sort of investment to get started to do something like this? And I would imagine there's sort of like an upfront investment versus like an ongoing investment, and kind of how does that typically balance out?
In terms of what's Middleton's contribution to their program?
Exactly.
Yep. I'm going to let John answer that because he's right there, and Elevate is managing that contract and Sustain Dane is managing the Madison contract.
Sounds good. Thanks, Claire, for the presentation. So Claire did have a little chart. I know we went through the slides. Depending on the program design, so maybe an iteration, a step would be interviews, do what we might call a landscaping survey and some site assessments to come up with a program design. And that, I think, according to the rough estimates, maybe was $20,000 to get a program design in front of council or feel really good about this is what we have and this is what we could do. Depending on how far that we want to take the implementation or the measures. So from there, we would really look at, well, how many buildings, how many units, and when it comes to how far we want to go, that is it simply energy efficiency? Usually we can get a pretty solid 20% reduction in energy efficiency for the tenants, right, with energy efficiency measures up front. If we want to go towards decarbonization, if we want to go towards that electrification where we're installing heat pumps, essentially we are, where we can, where it makes sense, removing natural gas, propane, or we're identifying and prioritizing homes that have electric baseboard heat, right? Because that's probably one of the most expensive forms of heating that's driving up utility costs, and then removing that electric baseboard or displacing some of that electric baseboard use as much as we can with a cold climate heat pump. So that cost, if we take that energy efficiency baseline, if the program is investing $20,000 in energy efficiency per building, right, we can do so many buildings from there. If we want to go towards electrification and mechanical systems, then we're maybe 10,000 a unit, right? So a 4-unit building, I mean, that gets expensive if we want to do that, but we're pretty good at leveraging and utilizing funds really efficiently and effectively, and we want to work towards that mission of resiliency and climate change, right? And then solar, where there's often buildings where we don't want to electrify a building and raise rent, right? That goes against the mission here, right? Which, when we add a heat pump at times, that can raise costs. So without solar electric to drive down that additional electric use, then that's can be a conundrum in that building. We don't want to do that. We want to find the funds for solar, which solar costs on top of the mechanical costs is going to double that fee. So if we go $60,000 to $100,000 per building, we can decide how far we want to go, right? So it's not hundreds of buildings per se that we're pursuing in any of our existing programs. We're really after, I guess, a whole building approach, a comprehensive approach to where we can improve people's lives, because that's what we're up to, right? And reducing the energy burden, the costs, so that housing is affordable for all types of people in the building. So we're trying to make it more comfortable, get them cooling for the summertime, reduce the energy burden, and create affordability for the municipalities that we work within, and help meet those sustainability goals. So a little bit on the broad costs and reasoning and comprehensiveness of this whole building approach, right?
And John, what was the number though? What's Middleton's total amount? It's $150,000 for 3 years?
Yes, so if Middleton dollars, their ARPA dollars is $150,000 per year. And we are coming in with a match dollars, Elevate through private philanthropy, coming in with a significant match to make those dollars go further. And that's something we negotiate and talk with each potential client, municipality that we work within, on what can we do to leverage additional funding, whether it's simply the private philanthropy dollars that we have available, or it's working closer with Focus on Energy for different communities, or it's applying and working in conjunction with Fitchburg to apply for the Office of Energy and Innovation grant program to tackle more houses within the building. So there are grant programs that are available that we do a pretty good job at making money go further with these merged funding sources.
Anybody else have a question? Thank you. Those are great questions and great answers.
Just a question on the Middleton program. It said 20 units. Is that 20 units over the 3-year period?
Yes. Well, and that's a rough estimate. We don't have that hard number, but that's an approximate if we go after 3 buildings per year. And we're actually, 2022, we got underway late. So 2023, we're going to do 6 buildings that may have 3 or 4 units per building. So we're probably going to be up to that 20 units just next year, right, to the 18 to 20 units in 2023.
Rochelle?
So, if I understand correctly, the city will put forth a sum of money to create a program, and then we'll have the city responsible for some of the expenses. There'll be some grants that perhaps come in, or other funding sources that can help defer the cost. What is this impacting the building owner? I mean, what are they just receiving this benefit outright without incurring any expenses, or how does that interplay work between the city, your program, and the building owner?
Good question. So money is one of the barriers that we saw to people moving forward with this program. The other one was the time and the investment that it would take for them to participate. So what we've been doing, and this was part of the grant that we put forward to the Public Service Center, is we said, we're going to take down the cost as the barrier to see what that does and what that means to get forward. And even with the cost covered, going to be honest, not all the owners moved forward. The other barriers were also there as well. We had owners that said, gosh, I got too much other stuff going on. Like I can't do this. Yeah. So to date, the owners have not had to also contribute a match or, anything like that. I think with the new IRA, with the funding coming from the federal government, I think it's going to be an important thing for us to continue to review and see what makes sense and how we can, move forward with a program design that works. And what works for Madison or Middleton may be different for what Fitchburg is looking for. But to date, that's how we've organized the program.
And I guess I would just maybe add to
Hold on a
that.
second. Michelle, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just another quick question, and that is, as you're identifying these buildings, and we have called out in Fitchburg aging stock, right? Are we also doing an analysis of, is it worth investing in the energy efficiency based on some other factors of the building, like say the age of the roof, the siding? There's a lot of challenges with an older building that are not just energy related. And if this is kind of like almost free to the owners, I don't know why someone would turn that down, but how are we making sure that it's the right buildings that get this benefit, and how do we also then not trigger anger or animosity on the half of people who are denied this program?
Good question.
Yeah.
I imagine this is what John might have been following up on. There was 2 owners, I believe, that they had challenges in, let's say, the foundational parts of their building that need to be taken care of before we would move forward. So one of them had a moisture issue; they had to fix that. Another one, I believe, had a pest issue. So the owner did make investments in those elements of their building. And John will speak to this, but he does an incredibly thorough assessment, and the building being in a condition that it will benefit is really important, and making the money go far. That's really important, So no, we're not just taking any building that walks through. There's a lot of balance. And we did that for Madison with them too. We also had all of the buildings go through a review from the city to make sure they were current on their property taxes and they were in good standing with the city. Definitely want to make sure that this is going to be well used and it's going to be positive for the city. But John, I think you wanted to share something too, so I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, and I think you touched on that in terms of that investment by the property owners. One program doesn't have to fit in every spot, so there's always room for that. How much does the property owner have in the game, right, and invest in the property? And that's always a conversation. And typically it has been, with the funds that we've had available, is to take care of the structural issues and make sure that the building is sound before we would put dollars towards. I know energy efficiency is a priority, but health and safety, sometimes there's dollars that we will help facilitate through the Lead Safe Homes program, for example, within Wisconsin, or other remediation of any other mold or lead type issues. So we look to merge those sources. And then the fairness is always a good question of, what if somebody doesn't get the dollars? Why didn't we choose another? And we have a pretty comprehensive eligibility criteria in terms of what have to be met, and then the financial analysis, the energy savings potential weighs in. Is the landlord in good standings with the city, right? We would work with you to make sure the taxes are paid and there's no liens on the properties, et cetera. So we do a pretty comprehensive review of not only the building, but how well that property owner cares for the community and the people that live within that building.
Any other questions?
Yeah. This is sort of a kind of nuanced question, but I know you described like process, but I'm looking for sort of relationship building. How do you, in Madison and Middleton, typically build those relationships with those property owners to kind of get at what you were talking about? Like, do they care about the community, and do they, is that usually done through kind of city staff and kind of economic development like we've got here, or is it you just maybe happen to see a landlord who has a good reputation, or how does that usually come about?
Yep. So for Madison, we work with the Northside Planning Council. So, a local nonprofit that is working with tenants and working with owners on the ground every day. In Middleton, it's Moms and the Senior Center are kind of our two community partners that we're working with. Also, they're the members of the community that are, I'd say, in the know, right? So we had interviews with them, kind of separate about, let us know what's happening, what's going on. So it really is, using those relationships to understand the landscape, and then building the relationship through the intake interview and, the investment and, kind of what we're seeing and hearing as we go through that process from their first interest to here's what the energy assessment is showing. Tells a lot. You can learn quite a lot.
I have a few questions. Does anybody else have any questions?
Olivia, I think Joyce had her hand up on the.
Joyce? Go ahead, Joyce.
Hey, Olivia, this might be more a question for you. In relationship to what the regional housing study's doing, is there a way that information, I don't know how in-depth the group is that's doing the work on kind of the housing assessment for the communities, but is that something that would help with this program, kind of that initial assessment of need?
Right, as part of the housing study portion of the regional housing strategy, we will be looking at housing stock age by municipality. And so we will get an inventory of that. And the plan is to have Claire and Elevate or John, a team from their organizations present at the regional housing strategy. So we can hear as a countywide the work that they're doing. Did I answer your question?
Sort of.
What, can you refine or repeat it?
I guess I didn't, I was just kind of curious as to what kind of information they were going to be gathering. So you just said like age and housing stock, but not any kind of details other than that.
Oh no, by unit size, right? Number of units, all the multifamily breakdowns, right? Yep. Mm-hmm. And then we're also doing the demographics on all of those units, right? Kind of like what we did in Fitchburg, but not. We don't have safety and we don't have the safety piece of it. We're not we're not inventorying units by, but we probably could infer that, by sprinklered or not sprinklered or, right. Yeah, that kind of thing.
And then I just have one question for Claire on the eligibility. I guess I forgot to ask you about the 80% AMI. Do most of the landlords, are they okay sharing their rent roll?
We do not ask for rent rolls. We use census data. So we use the census tracts that meet that requirement. And then we also, I think it's 50% or more. And then we ask for the rent of the building itself. So that's different from other programs you may have seen and can be a barrier.
And you say you asked for the different the rent payments that they're making.
Right.
Okay. Right. And 80% AMI or below, or is it 80% AMI?
Or below. But once you get to 60% or less, we recommend looking at the weatherization program.
Right.
Because funding available there.
And just observing, I'm thinking it would be helpful for folks to understand. You're definitely getting a really important niche, but where weatherization kicks in, because the weatherization can't do all the stuff that you're doing though.
No, I can't.
and that would be a really great comparison, so folks could see the value added with the work that you're doing. Anybody else have any questions before I get to mine? Okay, so you guys have, I think, some sort of philanthropic support. Is that expected to be ongoing, or is that like have a timeline where it's going to end, or how do you, what's the, you know, is that a dedicated dream for the next 5 years of partnerships? Or?
John, I'll let you answer that.
Sure. Usually the private philanthropy that Elevate's been fortunate to receive, sometimes it's on a 3-year cycle, and that 3-year cycle for a major donor is up for renewal. We expect that that would continue, but we couldn't make any guarantees. Others are on a yearly basis that we feel, with the history of the funds that we have received, they've been pretty ongoing. So we feel like things are feeling good for the next couple of years, that we'll have match dollars to put into communities, which we're really excited about. And I would have to defer before I could guarantee any amount of funds, but I think that I'm feeling really confident that we can come to not only Fitchburg, but other communities and say that there's a high likelihood that we would have match dollars for the next couple of years.
Great. And then the grant writing that has been happening either in Middleton or Madison, is that something that the local government does and you just sort of point them to the places that they think, or is that you guys do that? Is that part of the program costs, or?
Very much a joint effort. The St. Anne Elevate took lots of the lead in Madison for that grant, and then joint effort. Certainly we have not charged for that as a separate service. It's been kind of done in partnership and in alignment of the shared goal to move forward with the program.
And I don't remember the pie chart, or maybe you didn't have one. So it sort of comes out like a third philanthropy, third municipal government, third other sources. Is that how it breaks down, or is it just?
I haven't thought about it in those terms. For the city of Madison, I'd say we're probably more 2.5-ish, 2/3 for the grant funding for there. Mm-hmm. John, do you have a sense for Middleton? I don't know if you've thought about it in that way either.
No, I didn't quite hear the question. I'm sorry.
So just breaking out the portion of, municipal contribution versus the, philanthropic money you have, and then the potential grants, or
Yeah.
Is it break? It's like a third each, or, Claire just mentioned it might be 2/3 with the grant that you guys got from Madison.
Yeah, I think with the city of Middleton, as we bring forward, we probably have matched their amount around the 50% mark, what they would contribute. So that's a fair amount that we've been fortunate to bring. I can't say that would be in place everywhere. Depends on the grant cycle, et cetera. And I think not only with that effort, at times we've received the Office of Energy Innovation Grant that merges into that at the same time, which that application is out now, due the end of January. So there's a slight window that is open, where there's a fair bit of money from the state that helps at times pair up with these other funding sources.
So I'm not looking at the funding slide, but and maybe we could pull that up again, but so say you're going to move forward, it's like, just kind of get the program up and running, it's going to be $20K. And when you say get the program up and running, it's sort of like we're kind of making a 3-year commitment to you, Fitchburg or Middleton, right? It's like there's a certain timeline and a certain scope that you're working with, right? That's potentially could take up to 3 years.
Yeah, I think the 12-month timeline that we showed was including funding available for implementing some of the measures that would be identified in assessments. So that, that would be moving fast. We could spend a year doing interviews and assessments and then, kind of make a determination from there what makes sense for next steps in terms of funding. So different paces we could go at, different speeds.
Right.
But, we could deliver in a year, everything from interviews to implementation at a number of pilot buildings.
Right.
And then reflect on that.
Mm-hmm.
And then my other question is, so you kind of use community partners to identify potential buildings. Do you have a racial equity lens, or how does racial equity is that part of your decision-making process?
Mm-hmm.
And how is it?
Yeah, so that was also one of the reasons that we focused on the north side and the southwest side. So looking again at those census tracts, we also layered in 50% of the residents from BIPOC communities. So that was another way that we did look at neighborhoods to focus on, and where we'd want to try to focus the outreach.
So is that part of the overall Navigator program that's embedded in there, racial equity and inclusion?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, great. And then is that just for the residents, or is that also for the landlords? Because I'm sure some landlords are, also BIPOC.
We don't have census data around that to filter by. We do have owners that are BIPOC, but we wouldn't use that as a criteria.
And I it's really important to have a sound program and sound management and sound business owners and people who are up on their taxes. And but I wonder, yeah. This just is not a program. For folks who are struggling, as mom and pop, sometimes do with these units that they own, and or they're older and they can't take care of them like they used to when they were, whatever. Right, they're not able to receive this benefit.
Yeah.
But this program is not for that. But I'm just observing out loud that folks who might be struggling with units that are important and need to be, saved or upgraded or whatever, right, might not be able to benefit, because it's important that the money that goes in, gets utilized properly. And right, I wonder, I'm just thinking out loud here, because a unit might be delinquent in taxes, that could indicate what would that, yeah.
So I think two things come to mind. One is, I want to clarify that we had the city evaluate all the properties that had come in,
Mm-hmm.
and they got to make the determination if the building would move forward or not.
Mm-hmm.
So there was an owner that I think had like a tree assessment tax that hadn't been paid, and they said, nope, that's not going to be a barrier to this. You can move forward with that owner. So flexibility in what a program design makes sense for each community. And then the other one is, I think what also you might be talking about is this question about the code violations, or more of those structural elements, which we have not gone into with our current properties. Right. And we know that is something that Joyce and Michael shared, maybe of interest to this committee, and something we could explore, what it would look like to do an assessment that included identifying those elements.
Yeah, it's such a big issue, and I know that that's not the, purpose of the efficiency navigator, but it's such a big issue, and it's like,
yeah, well, it makes sense. You're in a building.
You guys are doing so much of the groundwork already, which is amazing. This program is really amazing. And, but yeah, there's really nobody out there doing this kind of thing. Like, is there a place to help, some of these folks get to either, net zero with their back taxes, or some of the code violations, or the safety issues, especially because we've learned a lot about safety and some of the challenge that residents, that real life safety and health and security challenges that residents have faced. Yeah. Anyway, I'm not asking you to take all this on, but I just know that it's a huge problem, and you're like, there's nobody else I know who's on the ground like this doing what you're doing. So.
Yeah, I mean, we
Olivia?
recognize that. We're in the buildings, and that's a
Yeah.
really unique place. We ended up building
Right.
a partnership with the Sewerage Authority and doing water softener assessments. And they said, we want to give you some innovation funding to help either, convert to just a hotline for the salt water softener, or to even
Wow.
upgrade old clunkers. And because they said, you're the people that are in the buildings. We don't have anyone
Right.
else in there.
Right.
And we said, okay, we can make that work. And we brought it into the assessment process, and we brought it into
So
the
cool.
navigator, and it's
Very
working.
cool. Yeah. Joyce?
Olivia, I think the city is somewhat unique that way, because we do have a really strong person on the ground, Jack. He reported out to us. I mean, he knows the buildings, the residents, the owners, the management company. So I think he'd be a really great resource for Claire and John, as they start to kind of even identify some potential. I think he'd probably have a wish list of places where he would like to see them go first, just based on communications that we've had over the years. So I think because we're still pretty small, we still have that benefit.
Well, I mean, that would be amazing, to have them connect and to have safety, some of the basic safety things we learned from him be included, but yeah. Yeah. So anybody have any other questions, or, Joyce or Mike, do you want to talk about next steps, or what, is this a first thing? Have you guys spoken to the any other committees on the council or to the council?
No, this is the first one that we brought this forward to. And I think next steps, and this is a larger discussion here, we've got the 2.67 million that came from TID number 6 this year that went into our affordable housing fund. And then in 2023, with the closure of TID 4, which will happen kind of in May, June, we'll put another 5 million in the bank there. And so one thing we've tried to do this year with this group is we've got a lot of different tracks that we're kind of discussing, and just having presentations of information to you simultaneously kind of through the year. And they include the rent-to-own program that's out there, rehabilitation, and that kind of covers the umbrella of working with Sustain Dane, Elevate, but also is there another track as far as that safety kind of element that we talked about when Jack was here, and that Fire Chief Joe was here and kind of reported out on what would be the kind of the structure of that program. Then another track that's out there that we had shared, 2 TIF developer agreements from Shorewood Hills, was the model that they worked with John Flatt on to integrate affordable housing units in market rate buildings, and those were at 60% of median income there. We've quietly kind of shared that model with a local developer. They ran some numbers. We've had some quiet preliminary discussions that we would like to kind of vet a little bit more with our city financial advisors, Ellers and Associates. So that's another track. So we've got rent to own, we got rehabilitation, we've got new affordable units within market rate buildings. And then the other track that we continue to spend a lot of time on is just senior housing in general. And at the March meeting of this next year, we're planning to give you an overview and update on senior housing in Fitchburg, but also to have our senior center director come, Jill McCone, to help give a perspective and kind of boots on the ground assessment of what they're hearing and experiencing. As far as, let's say, results, it's the senior housing where we probably have made the most progress as far as the goals in our 2019 housing plan, not only with the overall number of units, but with market rate as well as affordable, as well as continuum of living and care. So we want to give you kind of a good update on that. at the March meeting. But then I think, really probably June of this next year, our hope is that down each of these tracks, this group, along with CETA and the council, help us identify how do we want to utilize that approximately just under $8 million in funding to actually implement and do some programs. I think one thing we like about the possibility of working with Sustain and Elevate on a program like this is, and I think it's something that we've been hearing from administration and also from council is, we're a staff of two that wear a lot of different hats here. So are there partnerships that we can have with groups and entities that are already have a program created that we can contract with to do the work and, improve people's lives and buildings and make an impact without us having to create a whole new program internally here, because we just know what our resources are here from a staffing standpoint and everything. So I think that's one goal and objective and kind of directive that we've gotten from from administration. Specifically with the rent to own, I think some of the conversations are, it has the potential to be a high reward program, especially the way Mike and Steve have it structured from H&A Advisors, where it would be that endowment program. So it wouldn't be just a one and done 10-unit townhome pilot project. Hopefully it would be something that would replenish itself so we could continue to do future projects. That's the potential high reward. I think administration and some council people have expressed concerns about what is the potential liability to the city, essentially while those units are in the rental phase of the program and basically are really owned by CETA and or the city at that point in time. So when they express some questions and concerns on that, they asked us to kind of step back and to do some more due diligence to gather information to see how we can kind of manage or minimize the risk to the extent possible. It's not going to be to eliminate it completely. So one of the things that we've been doing very quietly over the last 6 months is meeting with a lot of stakeholders, and that includes everybody from the Dane County Housing Authority, and then we met with Madison Development Corporation and Lori Heinemann's group, who has the Workforce Housing Fund, and then they suggested we reach out to the Urban League, who actually had a rent-to-own single-family program, which was very successful in what our conversation was with Ed Lee over there. And then they both kind of connected us with Hope Community Capital, so we've had that conversation. So we're really making a good network. Everybody's really intrigued by the rent-to-own program. They think it has a lot of potential. They'd like to see us move forward with it, but we need to continue to do some of that due diligence that we're winding down right now. Our next ask of administration, before we would come back to the policymakers, is basically to go to some of the law firms that are experienced in the affordable housing sphere, and there's been multiple names that have been mentioned by some of the stakeholders that we've met with, and see if they can draft some potential documents both for, let's say, language for contracts that we would have with the developer, that we would have with the management company, to see from a legal perspective and framework, can they provide sufficient kind of protection as far as that liability that the policymakers and administration are concerned about. So that's going to be kind of the ask in the first part of the year is, could we spend a little bit more money to do that kind of legal vetting? And then we will come back to this group and also the policymakers to say, here's what we've learned. Here's the due diligence that we've done. In some of our conversations, because staffing capacity is another issue with that program, both the Madison Development Corporation and the Urban League maybe would be open to the idea of providing program oversight, not property management services for the 10-unit townhome program, but oversight of the program, and that we would just kind of contract, with them. So that's a lot of the conversations and work that's been going on quietly as we've kind of reached out to stakeholders and we've gone down each of those tracks. So we were really happy to hear when we struck up the conversation with Clara at the O'Brien Solar Field event that day and the good work that they're doing. We thought, hey, this kind of aligns with one of the tracks, and it also aligns not only with some of our housing goals, but it aligns with our kind of sustainability goals for our community as well. And so we thought that this was worth further conversation with this group, and then if there's interest, we would maybe also extend the conversation to CETA and ultimately the council.
I don't know if you can see hands from here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is great. For one reason, it reduces, carbon footprint of residents and buildings in the city, aligns with our sustainability goals. Also, there's obviously a cost benefit that is passed to residents, which I appreciate. So yeah, I would just say from my perspective, I would, support. It sounds like the conversation is moving towards $2. Going towards an initiative like this, as well as just leveraging, the support of a nonprofit to be able to help capacity and grant writing and raising funds in that way. So I'm fully in support. I know we would have to flesh out the details. Is this going to be a topic of a committee of the whole meeting before we kind of?
Yeah, there's been some conversation among some alders about having staff appear at a committee of the whole meeting to give similar update that I just talked about.
Yeah.
Because there's been a lot of work that Joyce and I have been doing very quietly, working with H&A and also reaching out to partners like Sustain Dane and Elevate here that some council people are familiar with, but others aren't. So they would like to have kind of a comprehensive overview of the four, tracks that are available to us. And then hopefully, again, with the infusion of additional dollars we'll have coming up in May and June, where collectively and then ultimately the policymakers have the final decision about how do we want to allocate those dollars and for what purposes and what programs. This is the first time we've really ever had any significant dollars for housing. That hasn't been in our toolkit before because we're not a CDBG entitlement, community, and we don't receive home funds. So this TID for housing is really kind of our first significant dollars that we have some money to work with to implement some programs and do some things.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Thank you so much for that update. That was very thorough. And Joyce, do you have a question?
No question. I just wanted to make mention too that in addition to to the things that Mike mentioned, we also had an internal meeting with the planning department to talk about housing, which was really something we haven't had a chance to do in the past. And it was really productive. And talking about how we work on some of the recommendations in the housing plan that are related to other departments besides economic development. So you may see some more reporting on kind of our internal conversations with planning too.
Great. That's great. Yeah, we'd love to hear that. Any other thoughts or comments or questions regarding the presentation or for Clara and John in general or specific?
The only thing that comes to my mind, I'm sorry, I'm interested in the rehabilitation program and the home for rent and how we make homes affordable. And anytime that we're going onto a property to do a pretty comprehensive view of all the things, what can we do to that building from reducing energy burden and decarbonization and making sure there's ventilation in there, right? And making sure that that building is comfortable and manages moisture well. Anytime we can pair those services up with an existing program, that's really cool, right? That's really strong, and it's really exciting to think that that possibility to, as I've gotten in buildings over the years, to work closely with the municipality to really improve existing programs in addition to bringing something new forward, right? So I'm not sure what that is. I just know that anytime we can leverage that's pretty cool. That's good.
I think the opportunity to work with these two organizations with this program also aligns with our Healthy Neighborhoods initiative and a lot of the objectives in there as well. So there's a lot of alignment, with things. And I think the other thing that it helps us is with the leverages maybe, or with the resources that we would bring to the table, it allows us to leverage some additional dollars that they bring from private philanthropy. And I think that's a business model that through the Economic Development Office, we've always tried to look at as far as how can we, whether it's through the Madison Development Corporation, our revolving loan fund program, or even some of our TID dollars, how can we leverage that to access some other funding sources to make a bigger impact and kind of make those dollars go farther.
Yeah, the healthy neighborhoods initiative. Neighborhoods. I forgot about that. It's like a perfect storm. Mm-hmm. Energy, sustainability, social, health and well-being, racial equity and inclusion. Yep. Well, thank you so much, John and Claire, for being here. Great presentation. You will be hearing from us, or certainly Joyce and Mike, as we move forward in these decisions regarding the upcoming funding that's needs to be distributed for this work. So good to see you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Great
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John and Claire, for all your help.
You bet, no problem.
So the next item on the agenda, resolutions, ordinances. I don't think we have anything. Subcommittee report. Do we have anything on resolutions and ordinances that anybody needs to share?
No, there isn't anything.
Okay. Subcommittee reports. Do we have any subcommittees?
No.
I didn't think so, but Report from department.
I think we probably gave the report in the conversation as far as the various activities that we've been working on throughout. And like I said, at the March meeting, we really want to focus on senior housing and some of the things that we're seeing and experiencing in that sphere, and kind of share some information that we've gathered on that as far as the unit types, the progress that we've made, maybe where there's still some gaps. And then I think getting the perspective from our senior director, Jill McCone, will be very enlightening and informative as well.
And could you you mentioned some March, we're going to be looking at senior housing. And what do you envision the process of these policies sort of getting sifted and winnowed down to okay, here's the 8 million, here's how we want to divide them. What's that look like from your perspective?
I don't think we know what the process is going to be yet. I think we'll have to talk to administration, more about that. Right now in our minds, we've kind of had the 2.67 million that came in from TID number 6, just as department staff kind of identified for the rent-to-own program. So I think that'll be one decision point there. If we proceed with the legal analysis and let's say get a comfort level as far as managing the risk to a comfort level that the policymakers support and want us to move forward with that program, then I think that would be one bucket of funding. That would still leave us another $5 million for whether it be the rehabilitation or whether it be affordable units integrated within market rate housing. And hopefully, if we have Ellers do some analysis for that program, we could bring that analysis back to this group to provide some insight on that one. So I think it remains to be determined. One conversation I've had, if let's say the decision ultimately is not to move forward with the rent-to-own endowment program, that people feel that there still is too much risk to the city. Another alternative for that would be we could work with a local developer here to do a one-and-done project and just do 10 units. It's one and done, and we've met a goal of reaching 80% of median income owners here. It wouldn't be an endowment program that would replenish itself, but that's another track that we could go down if the policymakers ultimately feel that the endowment program and kind of that rental period where the city's really owning the property, until they transition out with conventional mortgages and everything. If that's too risky for the city at this point in time, that would be a different way to let's say, do something on the ownership track and end product.
I just have a question. This came up at the Regional Housing Strategy meeting. The Village of Windsor recently created a zero lot line ordinance that allows for, I think, just 2-family. So it allows them to basically convert the units to homes and sell them to the renters. Does the city of Fitchburg have anything like that? And it allows them to, because it's 2 units, it also allows them to go around the whole condoization, which is, as we've learned, very much prevents the ability of this to, these single family units to be created. So they're essentially creating single family units in 2-unit developments. And I think you can also do it with 4-unit developments. I don't know. But is that something that Fitchburg does or knows about or is considered? Because I think it is, at least with at least 2 families, it's a 2-family rentals. It's a way to create affordable housing.
We've got a zero lot line, and that's what they're utilizing right now in Terravesa, specifically with the townhome product. And I think they've got, is it 8 units in a building there? That's been the workaround to continue to bring that product forward, since the condominium creates, some underwriting issues. So we've been, and those units are, they don't stay on the market long. As soon as they're constructed and kind of built, they're sold for it. So that's a much needed product. I wouldn't necessarily say that they're affordable. I think they're in the high 3s. They're even for a townhome unit product. They're good size. I think they're 16 or maybe 1,800, square feet, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. But that's a much needed product that we'd like to see more of here in Fitchburg. But we do have the zero lot line ordinance to help make that happen.
And I wonder, have you talked to any of the current owners of the older 2-family that could potentially, if they wanted to get out, like I think this is an older couple who was like, I don't want to own this 2-family anymore. And so they were able to sell it and create 2 single families. Is that something you've explored with older units at all, or 2-family units?
We haven't had any of those conversations, and nobody's necessarily, that I've heard of anyway, asked about that.
Yeah.
We have a lot of older, like 4 units in Jamestown that are condos, but they're using them as rental. They're all owned by the same, like the 4 units are all owned by the same owner, but they're still a condominium. Some have converted them back, some have not.
Right. Interesting. Okay. So, thank you. I'm looking at my agenda on my phone because, there we go. So, any announcements?
No, nothing that I can think of. Joyce, you got anything?
Yeah, we're going to give you an early Christmas gift and let you get done early tonight.
All right. So everyone, please have a safe and happy holiday. Thank you so much for all your work, Joyce and Mike. It's tremendous, all the work that you're doing. And it's just so exciting how things are moving forward here and the people and the resources you're bringing to our meetings. So thank you so much for all that work. And look forward to continuing. But in the meanwhile, please have a safe and happy holiday and stay COVID free. And thank you everybody on the committee for being here. So good to see you. Do we have
Olivia,
a motion?
don't hang up yet. We need a motion to adjourn.
That's what I'm just asking for. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
I so move. I second. Yeah.
All in favor?
Third.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Have a great holiday and we'll see you when it's a little bit warmer and lighter out.